Hello and welcome to the Newgen webinar, Trade Finance, the Digital Imperative. I am Mukul Agarwal and shall be your host and the moderator for this webinar. I thank you all for making the time to join us today. The response has been overwhelming and we are excited to talk about the nuances of trade finance in 2022. Today we have with us Mr. H.P. Sethi. He is a senior banker with more than 35 years experience in banking sector. He has catered to many senior roles across various organizations, including State Bank of India and HDFC Bank. We are also joined with Mr. Gurkripal Ahluwalia. He is Head of Trade Finance at Newgen. And Mr. Kaushal Verma, he is AVP New Banking Solutions at Newgen. Without taking much time, let me invite Mr. H.P. Sethi to take us through the presentations.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'll just set, before I move to the discussions on the trade finance operations business, a very small intro to Newgen. So Newgen is in 30 years in this particular business, and banking is our core sector. We have about 550 active customers spread in 72 countries. We have crossed the revenue mark of 100 million. And most of the products which we are going to show you today are all homegrown. And that is the reason of 44 patents. Out of that, 23 have been awarded. We are spread globally across North America, Asia Pacific, and EMEA. Although we are diversified in verticals also, but you can see BFSI, the banking vertical, accounts for about 73% of our total business. So our major focus has been banking throughout. The products which we are going to showcase you have been very strongly recognized by Gartner, Forrester, Aspire, and Aragon. Either as a visionary and niche player, which Gartner has considered us. Forrester rated us a very strong performer in the ECM space and digital process automation space. Aspire has also rated us to be a leader in automation space. And again, Aragon in the enterprise content management. So a lot of analyst recognition with us, and they are from last so many years. So after this particular introduction to Newgen, let me come to the main focus area of today's webinar. So I'll just start with what were the key challenges and emerging trends in trade operations. So these key challenges were very well known to all the people who are involved in trade operations. Particularly, we require a very good skill set at the branches, which is very expensive, very difficult to hire and difficult to train. In addition to that, there are a lot of disparate systems on which we have to depend for trade processing. Many a time we have to do duplicate data entry, particularly when we centralize trade operations. A lot of data entry again is done at a centralized location, which increases your turnaround times. A lot of things have to be manually processed when integrations are missing, particularly Swift. And as well as customer deliverables have to be delivered like a copy of Swift message or debit credit advice on their emails. So that is the manual processing which gets involved. And similarly, if there are exceptions to the particular trade transaction which you are doing, a lot of exceptions are cleared, through emails process, or deviations are approved through email process, or manually by putting, internal notes, maybe on a Word file. Next is trade is an intensive paper-based transaction processing system. So how do we manage this much paper? Another important challenge which always trade functionaries have been facing is the regulatory frameworks keep changing, and how the new regulations should be incorporated and as well as disseminated to the skill set at the branches also. In addition to that, a lot of banks face the problem of absence of real-time reports in managing their trades, and a lot of internal controls compliances have to be checked manually. There is no automation as such involved in this. And similarly, getting into trade charges calculations are getting complex day by day. So you have bank level charges, you have pool level charges for gold customers, you have charges for silver customers. Then you have product level charges, charges for LC, documentary credited, very different than the collection charges. And then you, in the product, you can even have charges which are specific to the particular limits which customer is enjoying. And then there can be charges very specific to the customer, to customer level charges. In addition to that, the charges can also be at the transaction level. So such complex charges calculations also keep banks at tatters, So these are the, traditional challenges which were in trade finance. Some of the emerging challenges which I see in trade finance in coming days is, see, the clients are now looking forward, to bank help them streamlining the inefficiencies in their own processes also. So they are not only looking forward to you in just automating the request they have asked, but how do they interact with their counterparts, maybe the buyers and suppliers? How do they communicate with the bank? So they are also looking, or maybe we can pick up the data from their ERP systems and automatically initiate the transactions. So these are the clients are now becoming very proactive and looking towards the banks in this direction. The second important thing which I find is that Basel III will fundamentally affect the profitability of trade business with increase in capital reserve requirements. So banks have to work more efficiently and have to increase the volume because this will otherwise seriously affect their profitabilities. So this is going to impact, the trade operations market quite extensively. The other area which was of concern is that some of the banks are very efficient and some of the banks are inefficient in their trade operations. The productivity between efficient and inefficient banks can be as high as 700%. So if that much is the gap, the inefficient banks will finally not be in a position to compete out in this market. And then trade is very fast moving towards open account transactions. In fact, in countries like US, they may be accounting for 80% of the global trade now, reducing banks' role to simply moving money between trading partners. So this is another important area which is going to impact the trade operations market. And how are banks, meeting these existing challenges and as well as emerging challenges? I'll just carry it out in my next slide. So there are certain trends which are emerging to manage your trade operations. So that how do we address those challenges which we discussed earlier? So one of the important trend which is emerging is that we must automate the trade origination. So you see, the trade processing was already automated. So everybody had a core trade module or an independent trade system running where you will punch the data, which will, create the Swift messages, do charges calculation, do accounting transaction. But the upper portion, which I call the trade origination portion, was still heavily paper based, where you have to check the, which I'll discuss in my coming slides also, check the completeness of the documents, the compliance of the documents. You have to take internal approvals, and that would sometimes consume even 60% of your total time. The second emerging trend is, can we move documents electronically in a paperless workflow environment? The third important trend is the whole trade processes are now being designed to be customer centric. The fourth trend is that client now wants to initiate and manage trade business on the portal. So two-way communication would become a very important concept as an emerging trend in trade operations. And then particularly those banks which have very high volume, they are looking towards intelligent data extraction to reduce data entry effort very substantially. That would bring the economies of the scale and reduce operational costs to a great extent. And then now the processes are being designed to improve the turnaround time, so that if something which we were doing in 40 minutes, can we now we do it in 20 minutes, 10 minutes? And also, can we bring straight through processing in sub processes wherever it is possible? So if can we do a straight through processing in smaller processes, so that that would also add to improving the turnaround time and as well as bringing in the efficiency and as well as reducing your operational costs. These are the trends which a lot of banks have started following in the world. The other is where skill set is becoming very expensive in trade operations. uh, so banks are looking for towards automation of UCP compliances, regulatory compliances, their internal credit policies. If they all can be checked automatically, so that even with a lesser skill set, they would be in a position to manage their trade operations. Secondly, what happens is banks have already invested heavily into trade. So they do not want to, meaning, shut their current trade technology altogether. So can the functionality which is already available with the banks, can it be leveraged through integrations so that the new trends can be attended to, maybe by putting a layer on the existing technologies? And then centralization, in fact, that is becoming a very important trend. Practically all banks are centralizing their trade operation because they somehow want to pool their skilled resources. As I've told you, resources in trade are becoming scarce across. Then, you know, even the best banker is not in a position to know today what would be a trade requirement 2 to 3 years from now. So there is no ideal solution left in the world. So banks are basically looking forward to an adaptable and configurable architecture. For example, if the regulators change a few new rules down the line, meaning they can easily be incorporated through configuration rather than coding or bringing change requests and putting a lot of cost into that. So that is where banks are looking towards to both build and buy kind of a functionality. When I say build and buy kind of a functionality, that means everything should be ready-made, and still if I require to build on something at a very, very low cost without doing much of the coding. So that is where the whole movement, the trend is in the world today. I'll actually detail them all these trends in my next few slides to you. And then how is trade getting supported on mobile devices and tablets? So these are some key emerging trends which are happening in trade operations, just to meet the challenges which I discussed in my earlier slides. So just to meet these emerging trends and so that we can attend to all the challenges, we started building up a trade finance product on a very, very low code platform. I'll just tell you what this platform is all about, and then I'll tell you what we have created as a product on top of this platform. So this platform is what we call is the Newgen One platform, which is not to deliver automation, but the word which we have used is hyper automation. So if I would use a pointer over here, just for a minute, yeah, allow me. So the first thing in this platform is this low code. So the whole development has been done on a very, very low code. I'm not saying it is zero code or no code, but it's a very, very low code so that the changes or configurations can be done very easily in future without incurring cost, time, and risk. And this low code is available even for your portal interface development and mobile also. So the first area in this hyper automation was the low code. The second beauty of this platform is that this platform also has a business process management system inbuilt. Because the business process management system is inbuilt with a workflow environment, it is now very easy to do, the journey orchestration at the customer side and as well as the bank side. So the banks can decide, meaning what steps should customer follow while initiating the transaction with them, and what steps would bank follow for each product or each type of transaction they want to do. So the journey orchestration is possible on both sides. So this journey orchestration, also helps. For example, if you want to do minimum data entry in branches because the skill sets are very poor, and you want to centralize the operation, maybe you will do five field entry only at the branch, and rest, in a digital environment, the documents move to a centralized location in a split of a second, and the rest processing is happening over here. As well as there is an RPA support, particularly when you have to integrate, with your legacy systems, or you have to, fetch data from those websites which do not have APIs readily available. So the whole RPA support is coming into this. In addition to that, which I'll discuss later also in detail, the business rule management support. Now, the whole idea was not to automate, UCPDC or ICC compliances or the SWIFT validation, but also to automate your, local bank requirements, your local government requirements, as well as your internal credit policy requirements. So that is where an independent business rule management system would be of great help. And similarly, to monitor your operations, there are now business operations dashboards. So the relationship manager's dashboard would be, very different than the team leader's dashboard, and the operations head's dashboard would be very different than the auditor's dashboard and the compliance dashboard. So everybody would be focusing on these their own areas which they have to work on daily basis. And these dashboards are online. That means you can refresh them in 30 seconds, 1 minute. And also, depending upon which areas are getting choked and how those choked areas to be addressed, there is a system of process optimization also. So I discussed with you that this hyper automation includes low code, and then you do the whole journey orchestration. And the third important is the tightly integrated content platform, which we call Omni Docs. Now, this is a very intelligent document processing. So, trade is a document intensive system. And once the documents have been digitized and we process the whole trade in a paperless environment, and once the transaction is completed, this document management system on this content platform automatically archives the document with various tags like customer name or customer ID or product name or transaction date. So they can be retrieved easily for reuse in the bank and as well as for audit purposes. And then, these document management systems can be tightly integrated with records management system. For example, if you have digitized the document and if you want to retrieve the physical copy of that document, the system can tell you, okay, this physical copy is lying in the building number so and so, in floor number so and so, in box number so and so, so that it's an easy retrieval of the original documents also. In addition to that, the next area I wanted to impress in this hyper automation was the integration platform. So, trade requires to be very seamless. That means I have to, pick up data from lot of places, a trade user when they initiate a transaction. For example, when we initiate a transaction, we may have to pick up credit bureau reports, or we may have to pick up Dun and Brad reports on suppliers and buyers, or we may have to check the availability of the limits in the core banking, or availability of funds in the checking account where charges have to be deducted. So the whole data can be pulled through integrations. Similarly, the whole data can be pushed through integrations as and when the transaction is completed. So this integration platform has catalog of services, a lot of pre-integrated services, which makes trade system as seamless as possible. And then the final area I wanted was on this hyper automation is that in long run, this platform is also supported by a AI platform. So the idea is that over a period when you build a lot of trade data of various customers, then you can take more informed decisions through modeling, which I'll discuss in detail in my next few slides. So that was the whole plan when the trade system was being designed, that how we hyper automate it. And based on that, this trade platform was created, which we technically call now a paradigm shift than the legacy trade systems which were existing in the world. Now, this trade product, which I am going to show, which is built on this trade finance platform or hyper automation platform, Newgen 1, which I discussed earlier, is exactly like any other package application. But it is no more a coded black box. It is why I say it is no more a coded black box, because it is built on the platform which I discussed earlier with you. Although it is like a packaged application, but this packaged application may meet 80% of our requirements of a bank, or 90% or 70%, doesn't make much difference. Suppose it meets even 85% of the requirements of a particular bank, the rest 15% can be reconfigured. That means without encoding, those additional gap requirements can be met using this framework on which this platform product is residing. So this is the platform and this is the product. So the product already has all the components, a standard out-of-box components like customer portal, method to digitize the documents, documentary LCs, standby LCs, export LCs, documentary collections, shipping guarantees, trade loans, supply chain finance are all there in the platform, which are ready to go to the market. But being on a platform gives them the power of configurability. For example, say the trade finance product which we are discussing has say LC opening steps as A, B, C, D. However, in a particular bank, two more steps E and F are required, and their routing is from A to E and E to F and F to B, C, D. Now, this can easily be done in this process modeler. So you can add two steps called E and F, and you can drag, drop, and reroute the whole trade business. Or maybe you need to add few fields to a form or remove few fields from a form. The form designer is inbuilt into the platform. So that makes life very easy. There you can add fields or remove fields without coding. Although IT expertise would be required, it's not the Business users can do it, but that is what brings the beauty of configuration into this whole concept. And then the business rule engine, as I discussed earlier also, it is not automating the international trade rules, but as well as your domestic rules and local regulatory requirements also. Master data management is standard where you define product parameters, which is there in every other package platforms also. But the next important component, as I discussed, is that every persona or user role has his own dashboards and own reports, and these all are online. And business users with some training can create their own dashboards and reports because this report creation wizard is inbuilt into the systems. And as I discussed, the integrations and adapters are also on the same platform, making it quite seamless. And then this whole system is tightly integrated to the content management, that is the document management system, so that the documents get auto archived into the system, which should be very scalable. Scalable in a sense that it can archive billions and billions of documents without affecting the efficiency of the system as such. So that is what I wanted to impress upon, where the whole trade products are moving in the world today. So the way these trade systems are nowadays deployed is that you can have a client front end portal where the client can initiate the request, every request from the portal, or the client can even walk into the branches directly or to your CPC directly. The second important area is this trade origination or the request handling. Now, this is the least automated system in most of the banks in the world today. Let me explain you the system. So when the client either initiates the transaction from the portal or he initiates through a walk-in, so the application has to be checked for its authentication, that it is the correct application. It has to be checked for the request completeness. That means all the documents which are required to be attached with these applications are there. And then a compliance check. That means every document which is attached to this request is complied with international rules, domestic rules, regulatory rules. Maybe the bank's internal credit policy has to be checked. Maybe a requirement of ad hoc credit limit is required at that particular moment, that has to be provided for. Now you see this area which we call as trade origination consumes around 60% of the transaction time. After once you have cleared the transaction, actual area which is called trade processing consumes only 40% of the transaction time, where you punch in the data into a core trade system, and then the core trade system can generate the swift messages or accounting entries or charges calculation and hand over the swift to the gateway. So this was already automated in most of the banks. This was the area which was least automated in most of the banks, the trade origination part, and that was consuming around 60% of the time. And to automate this system, it requires help of many areas, which I'll discuss if time permits me in detail also, like trade intelligence. For example, when you start application initiation, right at initiation, the system runs the intelligence on customers' transaction behavior and regulatory behavior to tell you if nothing is wrong with this customer. For example, this customer was, say, exporting cars and suddenly he has started exporting rice. It should immediately be forewarned. Or maybe the average size of the customer transaction was $100,000, and suddenly you are getting a new transaction of $500,000. That would forewarn you. Or maybe his transaction to high risk countries are increasing. Uh, so all these transaction behavior of this customer is kept in the history, so that trade intelligence can be run over that. And similarly, is regulatory behavior. For example, he had to submit certain documents. Maybe you have to submit to the central bank, and he has not submitted them. Can that immediately be red alerted right at the initiation of the transaction? And if we find the exception in the transaction, can that be routed through a senior functionary there and then in an electronic environment to be cleared through a trade memorandum system? And this should run parallelly as a child workflow, so that the main workflow is still not stopped. So the work keeps going on, and that can be stopped at another gateway if the transaction is not cleared by the senior authority. Maybe some customers have to be run through enhanced due diligence, and some customer may require bulk upload. For example, for one particular customer, you have to issue, say, 400 MT103 in one stroke. So can they be uploaded and immediately issued rather than punching transactions one by one? So this is all which is happening in trade origination. including checking your regulations and compliances and maintenance of the customer master. So what happens is the customer master, which is maintained in core banking, has say limited number of fields, but trade customer master may require additional fields to track his trade turnover, to track his trade behaviors, as I discussed earlier. And similarly, maintaining the details of the sanction letters of the limits to this customer. For example, you have sanctioned the limit to this customer, saying that the in this LC limit, the usance period can never cross say 90 days. But suppose you receive a bill of 120 days, can the system automatically forewarn you and you have not to read sanction letters again and again? So that is what is automated again in trade origination. So that was an area I just wanted to impress upon. That is where trade origination is becoming a emerging trend. And once the transaction has been cleared, then it is the data can be pushed to a transaction processing system where the accounting entries can be generated. Uh, now, in Newgen, we have all the three components: the portal, the origination, and the core, the trade system, the transaction processing system. And different banks have adopted, because it's quite modular in nature. Some banks have only picked up portal and origination from us, and they wanted to leverage their existing investment. And so that the data can be pushed into their existing core trade module, so that so much change is not required. So it's easier to do it. Some of the banks who had very very old legacy systems, they in any case wanted to go away with those systems. They have taken all the three modules, first, second, and third, including the transaction processing from Newgen. So it's quite a modular deployment, which I wanted to discuss with you. And in any case, this is supported by a document management system and business rule management system, as I discussed earlier with you. On the right hand side is the master data management, which is quite standard, where you create business entities, TF products, pricing agreements, and interest calculation. So the way trade is deployed in the similar way, supply chain financing is also deployed on the same platform. Only thing, the products change in over here. That means you have receivable discounting, forfeiting, factorings, and payable finance, which are a typical products in supply chain finance. Rest all the function flow or the workflow is exactly like any other trade finance system, which I discussed in my earlier slide. Just to give you a functional view of that I have given you from a deployment perspective. So from a functional view, this is the trade portal where customer can initiate the transaction, and it is a two-way communication portal. For example, when customer initiated the transaction, the bank found the discrepancy in the transaction, it is communicated back to the customer on the portal itself. And then the customer can resolve that problem on the portal, and it is updated at the bank's backend. So that is the portal portion. Trade origination I discussed in my earlier slide with you, where right from submission of the documents by the customer, whether I receive the data from the portal, the documents, or I get it through a walk-in customer, then the data extraction, balance and limit validation checkup before initiating the transaction, that balance is available for charges to be deducted and limits are available for transaction to proceed. Commodity purpose code check, online signature verification, fetching of rates and deals if you have to give the estimated rate to the customer, checking of the credit sanction terms, running customer through trade intelligence, if required generate a trade memorandum. And suppose a memorandum is cleared with certain caveats. For example, your senior authority said, okay, go ahead with this transaction, but please obtain these documents from the customer 4 days from now, then the deviation tracker would run. And if the document is not submitted by the customer in 4 days, let this be immediately escalated to all the concerned authorities who cleared the transaction with the deviation. And then checking all the compliances and regulations, and then all the system to keep all the audit logs at every step, and maybe running some customer through enhanced due diligence, and then going through all regulatory OFAC, FATF, SDN through integration if required. So this is where the whole origination, trade origination gets automated. It also has an SLA and TAT management inbuilt. For example, you want to complete a transaction in 2 hours. Say you promise your customer that the bank guarantee will be issued in 2 hours. So your SLA with the customer is 120 minutes. Now, suppose there are 4 steps to complete this transaction. So you can give a TAT or a turnaround time to each step. So the first step can be 40 minutes, the second step can be 20 minutes, the third step 20, and fourth can be 20 minutes. And you can keep 20 minutes as a cushion time. Now, what would happen in such a case is the system would automatically monitor time being taken at each step, so that in the evening you can check that how many promises were met, how many promises were not met, why were they not met, whether the staff was overworked, that means his capacity was to issue 10 guarantees and he got 12 that day, or he was undertrained, that means his knowledge in handling guarantee business is not up to the mark, so that you can do a something called as a continuous process improvement. Similarly, I'll tell you another important area built into the system is alert and notification. So you can trigger alerts and notifications in the system at any event. For example, you have to, take the approval of your general manager for a very large value, maybe $10 million transaction, and he's not on his desk. He's on move. So the alert can go on his mobile. Look, sir, this transaction is required to be cleared by you. He may not be in a position to come back to his desktop. He can clear the transaction on the mobile itself. Or, for example, you have received an empty 700 and export LC for a customer. So the system will automatically spool it from the Swift gateway in the morning, lodge it into the system, and send a notification to your customer as well as relationship manager that so and so LC has come for you. Kindly contact the branch. So the whole alert notification system, which can be triggered at all the events which banks can decide, is also inbuilt into the system. So that is the way, the functional view of trade origination I wanted to give you. And once the transaction is totally cleared, which we do a lot of third party integrations, which I discussed in my previous slide, then we can push the data to your core trade engine or the trade engine of the Newgen trade product itself, where, the charges, computations, and applications can happen, interest calculations can happen, accruals, rebates, accounting entries generation, Swift message generation, and customer deliverables. Now, these customer deliverables are again picked up back by the trade origination system. So, the customer deliverables can be like copy of the Swift message or a debit credit advice. So, this trade origination system can pick up these customer deliverables back and send it to the customer and relationship manager. Or they can be published directly on the portal also. There is no need to send an email to them. So, that is the view of the trade finance platform, which I just wanted to give it to you. The other area I wanted to impress upon you was over and above the functional richness and automation which I discussed, this also runs in an electronically driven paperless workflow environment. That means the system intelligently knows where to go in the next step. For example, if the case has been introduced and all the documents have been captured correctly and the minimum data entry has been done at the branch or at any other channel, and credit limit and balance have been checked, it knows if there is an exception handling and approval, it will automatically go for that. Otherwise, it will move directly to the transaction to your core banking place maker. And once the maker has cleared the transaction, the data entry has been done or data has been extracted using the extraction engine. So it intelligently routes itself in this workflow environment. For example, if suppose a discrepancy has been found at this step, at the final step, it intelligently knows to which step it has to go back, whether to this step or to this step. So that is the beauty of working in a paperless workflow environment. And this workflow environment is tightly integrated with banks' all internal systems, with your core banking systems, with your treasury, Swift, email gateways, as well as all external systems like portal, mobile, email, Swift gateway, so that it makes the whole system seamless. That the another important point I wanted to discuss on this particular platform was the design is quite futuristic. So as I discussed with you, the system is automated, it is seamless, it can do straight through processing wherever possible. It has a customer portal, it has a bank's area which is totally digitized, and then it has a support on mobile. But why we call it futuristic? That means this whole system is already being tested. For example, if the blockchain becomes a reality in trade finance from 3 to 4 years from now, then it has a support for DLT. That means all this is already being checked, with major blockchains like R3 Coda and Trade Connect. So the testing is already in work in progress. For example, in future, when this blockchain becomes a reality, you have not to change this front end at all because it's shaking hands over here. Let me give you through an example. For example, we were doing this testing in the blockchain ecosystem, particularly for this LC issuance. So through this slide, we have tried to explain to that how a blockchain and this systems have got tightly integrated, uh, so that how the transaction can originate in blockchain, the compliances can be done internally in the system, and then it reverts back to the blockchain, and then how it moves back to the advising bank node. So I'll not discuss that in detail today, but just wanted to give you a representation that we are very conscious of the requirement of blockchain in future and already working towards it. Just to give you a functional flow, so that was a functional view I gave you, and a functional flow. I'll take another minute to explain you the functional flow over here. That means the transaction can be introduced into the system through one of these 5 channels: email, mobile, portal, branch walk-in, or maybe a request has come on the Swift, like your MT 700. So once the transaction is introduced into the system, and it can be introduced through bulk upload also. Documents can be physically presented, they can be scanned, and once the data has been extracted from the documents, their system starts verifying the transaction. So they will validate the extracted data, run a duplicate check, do a core limit and balance check, do a core signature verification, run a treasury rate check if the estimated rates have to be given to the customer, and then run complete check the document for its completeness. Once that has been done, then the transaction can be enriched, and can be enriched at the branch if the skilled staff is available there, or otherwise at your centralized location, where an AML and sanction screen check is run. You can track the vessel tracking is required. Compliance and regulatory checks are run. Environmental social governance validation is done, which is a requirement in few countries nowadays. And once the transaction has been enriched, the system sorts it out, runs the business rules validation on the transaction, ICC, SWIFT, and other rules. Do an exception handling if there is an exception. Clear the deviation approvals, which I discussed earlier with you, and do a final treasury rate booking. And then the transaction can be finalized at your centralized processing center through authorizer, who will check the verification for its completeness, do a final document verification. He can still raise the discrepancy, do a swift purview verification at this stage, so that if swift purview is not coming accurately, he can still send it back for corrections, so that he knows exactly what would be going in the Swift message. And once he finalizes the transaction, then you can execute the transaction in your core trade system, and you can utilize the Newgen's trade from core trade system also, where charges calculation, as I discussed earlier, would happen. And if it is an external core trade system, then the Newgen trade system would bring the TRAN ID and TRAN date back as a confirmation, and then the Swift transmission and customer deliverable. And you see, then the transactions are handed over. The Swift message goes to the Swift, the document goes to DMS archival, the transactions go to core banking, and dashboards and reports of every user who is connected with the transaction get updated. So this was the functional flow uh, of the transaction which I wanted to impress upon. So the value proposition which we are giving is, one is the customer portal, which I discussed with you, is a two-way communication. Customer can initiate the transaction, branches can raise the discrepancies, customer can clear the discrepancies, which gets updated at the bank end automatically. So that is one of the good features which are there in the system. The second is the data extraction. That means right from classifying the data at the portal, to extracting the data, to validating the data, running the business rules on the data, and then moving it to the workflow engine if required for deviation or other data updation into the main system. So that is also one of the key features, the auto doc check. And then the vessel tracking is the system integrates with the main cargo handling, cargo details providing systems like Lloyd's, which can send you the vessel details, which you can run through AML checks as well as OFAC checks, so that the vessel may not have touched any sanctioned ports or other details which you can run on them. And the last, I wanted to show you that in future, the whole data can get stored into the AI system, where you can run trade intelligence. So you can transform the data, you can do multimodal pipeline, validate your models, do machine learning operations if required, or auto ML, or explore the data. So this is still a field area which we are also studying, that how much AI can be used for taking automated decisions in trade and as well as contacting customers, helping customers out. So this will, once the data gets collected over 1 or 2 years period, then this modeling would be possible. But what I'm impressing upon is that the AI for trade intelligence also is one of the platforms which banks can look forward to. So to close I just wanted to spend another 1 minute on the technology side. So I've been more functional till now, but on the technology side, I wanted to impress upon is that the Newgen would support microservices platform. It is available on the cloud. So the containerization and microservices, because the whole world is moving in that direction. And nowadays, not only in-premise deployment, but the cloud deployments are to be supported. So we support all of them at this particular stage. I think I am done with my presentation. I hope I was within time. I've left those 15 minutes for questions. Any questions? Me and my team, Kaushal Verma and GK Saluwalia would appreciate questions and would love to answer them. Mukul, you
Thanks,
can take.
Mr. Sethi. That was really insightful. I request our audience to start typing their questions in the question panel on their window towards the right. I have received some questions. Let me pull them up. Mr. Sethi, this is a question for you. Does the system have capability to scrutinize documents as per UCPDC to
Correct.
identify discrepancies?
Yes. So the system uses an extraction engine. System has its own extraction engine, but to achieve a level of accuracy, it also uses a lot of external extraction engines. And once the data has been extracted, the system runs these UCPD rules over them to find out the discrepancies and then move these discrepancies to the workflow engine for resolution. The answer is yes, Mr. Book.
Thanks. Continuing on that, what is the OCR tool that you use for capturing data and what is the accuracy rate?
Kaushal, can you take this?
Yeah, so it's not one. We are actually using a combination of 3 tools, and whomsoever is giving us the maximum accuracy field wise, we are populating the data on the basis of that. So there are some AI ML based algorithms which are running on top of these OCR engines, and from where wherever we get the maximum confidence, we populate that field.
Thank you, Kaushal. Next question. Can profitability analysis be generated per trade transaction?
Kaushal?
Sorry, can you come again?
Okay, I'll repeat. Can profitability analysis be generated per trade transaction?
See, that is very much possible. The algorithm bank has to give us. So we are capturing, all the details of the transaction, including the charges and fees taken on the transaction. So if the bank gives us the algorithm, we can set up the algorithm. As I've told you, are sitting on a very highly configurable platform. So
Yeah.
you can easily then calculate the profitability each transaction. Yeah, Kaushal, you wanted to add something?
The dashboards which are available, these reports can be made available. As Mrs. Sethi said, we would like to understand the input cost, the cost of funds and all that, and the transaction details are already with us, so we should be able to give you the profitability report the way we do for the other products in banking. That should not be a challenge.
All right. Thanks, Kaushal. Next question, although I will read it out, but post webinar, please do write to us. We can set up a meeting on this. So the question I'll read it out is, can you show how to validate the balance LC in each event of LC?
Yeah, I think for that, maybe a demonstration
Demo will be required.
Would be not be able to explain it over here.
Yeah, so I'm getting these questions to my audience. On this session, we are not showing the demonstration. of the platform or the product. But yes, we can certainly set up a call together post this webinar session to go through the demo. Please drop us a message on webinars@newgensoft.com for any quick meeting with our experts. I'll
Mukul, you
repeat.
put that on. Mukul, I would recommend that you put that on the chat also, so that everybody can see.
Yes.
We will be more than happy. See, the idea of this webinar was to just to give you a glimpse of the overall trade value proposition that Newgen offers. So if any of the participant wants to have a deep dive session with us, we are they are more than welcome, and we can arrange a one-on-one session wherein all your detailed queries can be taken up. Yeah, Mukul, any more queries? Any more questions?
I'll quickly take one or two. I request my audience, keep on asking the questions. Our panelists are really happy to answer them all. I'm getting few more questions. GKS Aluwalia ji, if you would like to take this one. There is a lot of time. There is a lot of time and bandwidth lost both at bank as well as customers for following up for a transaction to check its status. What can be done digitally to bring efficiency around the same?
See, basically, in our system, there is a real-time update of the status for the customers on their portal, as well as whenever any event of the transaction gets completed. As Mr. Sethi also shared with you that there is an alerts and notification, one of the feature in our system, and immediately email is triggered to the customer or the relationship manager to share the status of the transaction. So it is available on web portal also real time, as well as the moment the transaction is completed, an email is triggered, so the customer for his information, attaching the customer deliverables as well. Yeah, Mukul, that's it.
Thank you, sir. All right, looks like I can take one more question if there are not any more.
Yeah.
All right. There was a mention of DMS system for document storage. How can one access the documents once the transaction is completed?
Yeah, so as a part of the archival strategy that we will discuss with the bank, the entire documents which were processed for a LC issuance, advising, or bills under LC, they will be automatically archived into the document management engine, and there will be some metadata that will be attached, like the LC number or the KIF ID of the customer, name, transaction date, amount, whatever strategy we agree with the bank will be defined for those documents and folders. So at any given point of time, the document management engine would be able to retrieve those documents based on the metadata, and the DMS is device agnostic, so you can always look at those documents on mobile, tablets, or on the desktop as well. So it's just a click away.
It's a unified system. Yeah, just Mukul extension to it. It's a unified system which has the which facilitates the origination of the transaction, then the transaction processing also, and the archival of the documents in the DMS system, which is closely integrated all these three parts. Now, a user who wants to inquire for any reason, whether it is required for audit purposes or just to see how the past transactions have been, the documents submitted, it can be easily filtered out through the main application itself, mentioning as Mr. Kaushal said, the transaction number or customer name or cust ID or product name or date of transaction, the documents can be retrieved along with the metadata to really see the transaction. Thank you.
And one very important thing which I would like to add here is all of this is available and extended to the customer portal as well. So many a times there are many queries which banks receive for sending out customer deliverables, like the debit advices, the Swift message itself. So the customer can log in into the portal. The document management window is exposed on the portal itself for that particular customer. They will be able to download all these advices and other documents from the portal itself, for which they don't have to call the call center, or the support desk of the bank as well. So that is again a very big plus from the bank perspective.
Thanks, Kaushal. Thanks, Mr. GKS. I'm getting more questions here.
Yeah.
So next is dynamic discounting and warehousing financing available in our system?
Aluwali, you want to take it?
Yes, that is available in our supply chain.
Great. Next question is, can you mention the readiness of our platform geography wise, if I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so I can take that question. So the business rule engine, as I discussed with you, so there can be two sets of rules. You can have generic rules which are globally applicable, and then you can have regional rules, each geography wise. And then each geography wise, you can have separate workflows. As I explained it, the journey orchestration can be done geography wise. Business rules can be applied, each geography wise, and as well as your bank's internal orchestration. So not only the customer journey but the bank's internal geography orchestration can be done each geography wise. Then you can also do that, you can operate regionally and as well as process centrally. So each geography can also be processed at a completely centralized location. So that is the advantage of sitting on a journey orchestration system.
And actually we have done this, Mukul. We are working with a bank where it's a multi-country rollout, and there are some local compliances which we are managing through the BRE, which is very specific to that country, as Mrs. Sethi explained.
Yeah, and it is multi-currency also, because each country has its base currency or different base currency.
Absolutely.
So the system supports that as well.
Yeah. Mukul, you can move to the
The next question, I'm getting it again and again. So in one question, I'll try to cover it. How quickly can you deploy this system?
Kaushal.
Yeah, see, it depends. Generally, what we have seen with trade implementations of this scale, banks tend to automate, in phases. So, the higher volume products, which are specifically with respect to the, the remittances as well as your documentary credits. So, we can make the first product live in, let's say, 4 months timeline. And if you ask me about the overall project plan, it should be somewhere between 8 months to 12 months.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess that's give an estimated timeline to our audience. As we are reaching the end of the presentation, I'll take one quick question. I'm getting this again repeatedly. Mr. Kaushal, if you can give us some estimated idea, how many clients or banks are using this system currently?
There are some 10 to 12 customers globally that we have currently, which are based out of India, APAC, Middle East, and a couple of them in the US market as well.
See, just to add to what Kaushal is saying, see, this technology is very, very new. So this technology is not even 5 years old. So getting more reference site at this stage is not possible. because whenever you bring new ideas and new technologies into place, so you will not get as many references. Suppose the technology has been 20 years old, I would have shown you far more larger references and deployment. But uh, the whole idea is whenever a new technology comes, there are few people who will take first mover advantage. Few of them would wait it to mature out. So a lot of banks have shown confidence, as Kaushal pointed out. Right from US to India, they have deployed it because they also understand that this is a completely new idea to bring a trade finance platform on a low code. It was never there, in the past. So reference side will keep increasing on, but yes, there is a good amount of traction for us.
In fact, we are the first one to create it on a low code, a trade finance product.
Thanks for the answer. I believe this also gives a lot of idea about our reach. Quickly, one more question I'll take here. Functionalities like conventional banking and Islamic banking, are they available for a same customer having offices in different geographies?
Aluvalia will take this. Aluvalia.
Yes. The conventional as well as Islamic banking is available, for implementation and under this trade finance product.
Thanks. Well, that brings us to the end of our session today. I really thanks Mr. Sethi, Mr. Kaushal, Mr. Ahluwalia for this insightful presentation. I believe our audience have gathered a lot of insights about trade finance in general and Newgen's capabilities. I would still urge not to stop here. Our email ID is webinars@newgensoft.com. Please do write us. Our panelists, our expert will be happy to get on a call with you to take more deeper discussions after this. Thank you all. Thanks for your time. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a nice.
Thank you.
Bye.